welcome to episode 1 of Teacher's Lounge. Today with me I have Mr. Kimzey, who teaches 2 of my favorite classes, U.S. History, Sociology, and then AP History. So do you just want to introduce yourself a little bit first?
Yeah, I am Dan Kimzey. This is my 26th year teaching. I started out teaching mostly freshmen, like a lot of new teachers in global studies. And then I got a sociology class. So I got a break from the freshmen one time a day. It was so awesome. I'm excited about it. And after doing that for some years, I became an administrator and spent 17 years as a vice principal or a principal. And had an opportunity to work my way out of that stress ball and get back to teaching. And I've been doing that for the last 4 years.
Nice. What's one aspect of teaching that you've always just loved?
I guess I love, as far as teaching in general. I like high school kids. I mean, I just like the energy of the high school. I enjoy being around them. And so that makes it, you have to have something like that. If you're going to stay in a career for a long time, there's got to be something like that. As far as teaching history or social studies, everything, I mean, I love the stories.
Which is your favorite class to teach out of your 3?
Sometimes it depends a little on the group, I think. Like sociology right now, I've got pretty good participation and a lot of I get a lot of student ideas, and that makes it so much better for me to teach. If it's just me, if I have a real shy group that's hard to get to talk, sociology can be a little tougher. But I like the AP history is really I mean, it's pretty demanding, and like I have to get from X, Y, and Z. I have to teach this whole long curriculum that's really from before European exploration in North America to the present, pretty much. And I'm kind of free spirited about how I like to do stuff. So that AP US history has really forced me to be much more, I don't want to say rigid, but to really plan a lot better. Because in the other history, and in the regular US history, one of the things that I love about it is if there's something that really seems to energize the class, I can spend more time on it. Oh, favorite story. We don't really have world history. Someday I'd like to teach AP world history. I like some of those. I like to think about the Mongols in the 13th century, just how absolutely huge of an empire that this group of people controlled through violence, really, and how they spread all the way from the Far East into the Middle East and up into Europe, right? I mean, it's just amazing that you'd have this civilization that didn't really build anything but conquered everything. So some of those stories are pretty fascinating. That some of the ancient stuff, the U.S. history stories, they're all great stories, and I like a lot of them. I like the Depression, where we're at right now. And I like to kind of think about how my grandparents, the experience of that on them really, really made them, that generation, what it is. I think it made that generation the generation that was able to withstand World War II, because they had come from hardship. They grew up in hardship. They knew it. And I like to think if we could do the same today. In all of these scenarios, in the back of my mind is, could we pull it off as a country today? Like, could we get our act together to be able to weather a storm like that? So to me, everything that happens in history relates to the present day, and that's what keeps it fascinating for me.
You mentioned previously that you were the principal for a while. Which is better, principal or teacher?
There's a pace, a high school principal in particular. I was a middle school principal for 5 years, and you didn't have like as many concerts and plays and athletic competitions and stuff like that. So it was easier to manage time wise. But not that I don't like kids that age, but I don't really like kids that age. And 7th grade boys are my least favorite of the human species. So it just, if you're going to be a middle school teacher or middle school principal, you better love those kids at that age. And I could kind of take or leave them. And now I loved the middle school teachers, right? The middle school teachers are so good, um, because it's kind of like a cross between a high school teacher and an elementary teacher. And they've got such a better, we can be pretty compartmentalized here and just think about our little part of the world. But those middle school teachers, their view is much broader. They look at that whole campus as their responsibility. And that was really cool. Coming from a high school teacher background and a high school vice principal, that was the most impressive thing about the middle school. And I lost track of what that question was.
It was which is better
Oh,
teaching?
oh yeah. So high school principal is a really, I mean, for someone who likes leadership, I say it's one of the ultimate challenges, right? Because you've got the time demands are pretty amazing. But it's definitely high profile. Like things that go wrong tend to go wrong. Big things tend to be with high school kids. It just seemed like you have to love being a high school principal because you're never not a high school principal. And so as much as I loved being able to kind of set the direction and really hire awesome teachers, and I'm really, really proud of the teachers that I hired while I was principal that I get to work with now as teaching colleagues. I mean, I'm really proud of them because they're awesome. They're people like Miss Nisley and Mickelson, and they joined a team with some really big superstars on it, and they fit right in. So it's like, to have that impact was really, really awesome. But as far as general satisfaction with life, being a teacher it's not even in the same conversation. It's two different jobs in the same building, but there's no comparison. Not to say that teaching's easy, because it certainly is, and it takes a heck of a lot of work and a lot of commitment and stuff. But you can leave mentally, and you can leave physically, and come back the next day, right? All of us here, I'm sure, spend some time on the weekend grading papers, and with midterms due on Monday, I reckon I know what I'm going to do a little bit on Sunday too. So I never want to say that it's easy, but the stress level, it's not even in the same conversation. Like there are some things I'm really proud of that I got to do as principal, but for life, for my happiness and the things I like to do in life, man, teaching's the way to go, because I can have two jobs again. Like my 6 years as a high school principal is the only time in my life when I only had one job, and that job happened to be an inside job, and I have to have something outside. So now that I can, teach 9.5 months of the year, and I can guide fishermen for a couple months in the summer, and I love it. It's awesome, and I get to work with guys like you, cool people.
Since I asked what you loved most about the teaching community, what's something that's always bothered you?
I think a lot of people who badmouth schools have no idea of what the hell they're talking about. They have no idea. They get it from some media source, or they have this notion that there's all this crap going on in the school, and they're absolutely dead wrong. But they're loud about it. Their wrongness is loud, and it's that to me is frustrating. I've never had the personality to where I'm just going to let people take shots at me without responding, and so I get really frustrated when I don't have an opportunity to respond. I mean, it frustrates me that there's enough members of the public who loudly criticize in a blanket picture of history teachers or of schools, and it makes me pretty darn mad. So I think that's something that we don't have a lot of control over, obviously, but it is something that gets my blood boiling a little bit.
Yeah. Do you ever because of how many movies are being made about schools and stuff, when the history teachers come on, do you ever get offended? That's
The stereotype
yeah.
of yeah, there's definitely a stereotype of I would say history teachers and PE teachers, right?
Mhm.
Any movie or any media portrayal, there's definitely a kind there's definitely a stereotype in there. If that's what feeds the public's image of of what a teacher is, I guess that's probably not the best thing, but it is kind of funny because there are there's a little bit of truth in the stereotypes, though, people that I've worked with, or myself even, in some of those stereotypes are pretty close.
So why are you a teacher?
Man, it is kind of like my grandma was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, it's just kind of the family business to one degree. Now, in high school, I had no interest in becoming a teacher. I didn't really think about it. I was going to be something outside, like a wildlife biologist is really what I wanted to be. But as after I had gone to the Army, and I guess I kind of started seeing that history might not be a bad way to go, because there's so much of it that you relate to differently when you have some experiences and exposure. So when I first started college, I even was thinking of being like a physical therapist or something like that. Got myself a C in my first 4-credit anatomy class, which made that decision for me right then and there. And at that same time, I had this fantastic professor at I was at Western in Western Montana College then, Western now, Dr. Tash, and Dale Tash was born and raised in Bannock, and if you ever go to the cemetery in Bannock, I don't know if you ever have. It's well worth just spending a few minutes walking around and looking at the headstones, because some of them are from the 1870s, and these family names are pretty amazing. And there's lots of Tashes in that cemetery, including Dale Tash now. But he talked about the winter of 1886 and 1887 in Montana that, drove a lot of the cattle industry. It ended the open range for sure in Montana, but it drove a lot of people out of the cattle business. And he was talking specifically about Charlie Russell's painting, Waiting for a Chinook is what it's called, or The Last of the 5,000. And it was one, this ribs sticking out on a cow with a bunch of wolves hanging around, just waiting for it to become something they eat. But he told that story he told it so well that as I'm sitting in the desks in this lecture hall, I'm like literally cold and shivering. I'm like, there was some magic in that. And at that moment, like, I realized that's what I was going to do.
And then, just for kicks and giggles, what's your favorite song?
Man, it might be Leonard Skinner's Curtis Lowe, or it might be this old song called Coyotes by a cowboy poet out of Texas named Don Edwards. Because either one of those. One's a rocker, one's kind of about history, but I like those. And I love the music, and that's why I try to do history and rock and stuff like that, because I know there's a percentage of kids in every class whose parents are into classic rock and kind of historical good music, and you can definitely figure that out in a hurry. Like if your parents exposed you to the good stuff, it's kind of neat to see, because the kids know it. Right? They've already had a preview of some of that stuff.
My best friend was sitting behind me in history yesterday, and Mercer showed us that that song.
Oh, the Woody Guthrie.
And I
the Do Re Mi.
I look behind me, and my best friend is giggling, and I was like, "What is going on?" And she goes, "I know this song." Like, of course you do.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, there's so much of it. It's like it's the music's the story of our culture. It's the story of history. It's awesome. It's like primary documents in a way that, instead of nugging through some really, really hard reading, it's listening to it and getting the picture.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of run out of questions, because I wrote the script at 1 a.m. and I was tired, so I ran out of questions. Let me see. Ooh, who's your favorite teacher friend?
Oh, in here?
Yeah.
Man, we've got some good ones. Like, I've got Mrs. Carmody as like a teammate in our AP class. I next door neighbor is old Mr. Wells, and Wells was my vice principal for a year, he kind of realized earlier than I did that maybe there's a little more life satisfaction in teaching instead of principling. Um, and so to have kind of the two exiled principals down here, I'd say that that's pretty awesome. Rare that the two former principals from this building get their classrooms right next to each other. And so Wells he's a great person, and I enjoy having him as my next door neighbor.
For sure. Well, that was my last question. So this has been really fun. Always enjoyed
I
interviews with you.
appreciate
it. So yeah, thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Yeah.
And that is going to be it. Thank you for coming into the Teacher's Lounge with us, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks, Anniyah.